Welcome to the Beat Sessions, your place for all things music. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Let's talk about HAIM and their record, I Quit. They released that on June 20th. This is the fourth studio album from the California Rockers and their follow-up to 2020's widely celebrated Women in Music Part 3. And HAIM is a band that has been crushing it pretty much since day one. From the moment that Danielle began touring with Jenny Lewis and Julian Casablancas, which ultimately led to the fortuitous decision to turn down an offer from CeeLo Green to be in his backing band. She did that in favor of writing and performing with her sisters. And this band's sound integrates a brilliant combination of garage rock and R&B, all within a massive pop drive. And I Quit is a record that showcases the continual evolution of their sound on a number of these compositions, particularly in the first half of the album. There's the breezy 90s R&B drive of artists like Aaliyah and En Vogue, the pop-oriented rock stylings of Fleetwood Mac and Prince, just to name a few there, and the anthemic stadium sensibilities of artists like Sheryl Crow and the band's good friend Taylor Swift, all mixed in with a bit of punk rock energy, which I will say I love this band's albums, but their live performances, I definitely think take the cake. And on this record, there are many other influences that work to keep this record engaging. But for me specifically, I love the moments where this group taps in to the country blues influence of artists like the Rolling Stones and the Flaming Groovies. I feel like it's kind of the first time they've dabbled in this territory. They do this on tracks like The Farm and Blood on the Street, which I would say is a track that is worthy of its penultimate status. I just think that it's unfortunate that it requires stumbling through some of the tracks in the back half of this album to get there. But more on that in a moment. I want to focus on a couple of the many positive things about this record. First and foremost, I think what truly sets I Quit apart from their previous efforts is the album's focus on a central theme. And in this case, bigger picture, removing toxic elements from your life, but more specifically, a bad romantic partner. And I loved reading that the title is a reference to the famous scene in That Thing You Do when Jimmy leaves the band. He looks right at Tom Hanks' character and just sings, I quit, I quit, I quit. I think that quitting has a negative connotation for the most part, but in life, it is so important to identify when something isn't serving you well. Relationship, a job, quitting isn't always a bad thing. And we've all been there. The peaks and valleys that come from cutting the cord of a relationship that was once good, that was once mutually beneficial, but now it just stymies growth. It's frustrating. And this record, it's the pangs and frustration of romantic love that really paved the way through the first half of it and give it its strength. And I'll say that apparently this is the first time that all three members have been single since high school. So there's definitely no holding back, especially on album opener Gone and the single Relationships, which is ironic because it's the band's first album to not feature production from longtime producer Ario Rekshai, Daniel Haim's former partner, who also helped write that song Relationships. And I think it's pretty obvious that much of the album's ire is directed at him. Thankfully, though, we still have Rostam Batmanlij, formerly of Vampire Weekend. He's still involved after working with the band on their last two records. I feel like him coming into the lead is a great move, and I appreciate the dynamic that he has with Danielle, featured as a writer on all of these songs. His influence has, I think, really helped this band find better synchronicity between rock and roll and pop. I think that this album has a bit more of a rock and roll energy, but I like the way that it's dialed back a bit. I think that really complements the album's narrative, which begins on solid ground, but it gets a bit shaky towards the end of this record. The biggest weakness of this project, I think it's what holds it back, is from arguably being better than its predecessor. Women in Music Part 3 is an album that runs at 13 tracks, but it still comes in at a tight, cohesive 42 minutes. And lyrically, the album demonstrates growth, but the themes on that record never come together quite the way that they do on I Quit, especially when it's working in its best moments. And this is a band that's always taken risks with their music, and now they're doing it with their storytelling, and I love that. But the problem is that towards the end, this album loses steam and continuity, especially with songs like Spinning and the song Cry. Not really a big fan of it. I think that these and others fail to have the impact that earlier tracks have, both musically and lyrically. And as much as I love U2 album closer Now It's Time, which samples the song Numb from the album Europa, it just feels like going back to the buffet for a fourth plate when you know you didn't even need the third. The tension of this album starts off so brilliantly with that frustration in relationships, and then it just kind of fizzles out, and it's unfortunate. This album opens up with the track Gone. It's going to start with this hollowed sounding acoustic guitar riff that shuffles along, with Danielle's vocals chiming in shortly after. Harmonies and bass drum hit simultaneously to pick up the energy with a bit of soul before subsiding and then building back once more to usher in more of a rock and roll feel on this track. The electric guitar plays more of a role, but the track maintains restraint, with the drums following suit as they continue to build. There's lots of other percussive textures that go to work as the song builds towards the end into the coda, and I was laughing because I was like, this kind of sounds like George Michael's Freedom 90 with a faster tempo, and then I realized, oh yes, they're sampling it. So if that sounds familiar, you're not crazy. I love the little homage there. Your second track, All Over Me, starts with this muffled percussion that opens into this breezy acoustic rhythm, and then this gently crashing staccato flare. Percussion is mid-tempo, but rides this driving hi-hat that I really enjoyed. The vocals display a light delicacy to match the track's energy. The rhythm guitar fills out more space as a bit of electric guitar starts to kick in and other layers of guitar and production begin to work. And that's definitely Rostam, like his influence big time there. The build subsides around the 2-minute and 15-second mark to let a solo work with a minimal backdrop that matches the opening of the track. There's a shift to a brief bridge that leads to the hook-led coda of this song to finish it off. Going into your third track, the big one, Relationships. This is a track that opens with crashing drums and vocals that capture this breezy pop atmosphere. There's a bit of piano that trickles in, and the drums bringing more of a punch shortly after. A funky little bass groove builds in and to carry the track as it pines over the frustration of relationships. And I'm still laughing that Ariel is involved on the writing of this track. Twinkly piano textures continue to work in along with lots of harmonies. Definitely showcases the quirky, playful side of their sound. And I love that they haven't lost that. I think that it's quintessentially HAIM, and I hope that they never let that disappear. Down to Be Wrong is your fourth track. I love this song. Vocals open immediately with this hushed tension, layers of percussion, and a simple bass riff with a soft tone. The mood is one of affirmation despite sullen circumstances. I dig the way the bass becomes more playful with a bit of guitar that works in briefly on this track. Got breezy guitar that reappears with soft keyboard textures for a pop-driven track that's really reminiscent of Sheryl Crow. Big artist that I feel has influenced them. Electric guitars steal the spotlight around the halfway point on this one, with vocalized harmonies working in. Hits a big jam to finish and fades out, and I definitely think it is a highlight on this track, especially that first run of the 4 tracks. Your fifth track is Take Me Back. Breezy acoustic guitar and up-tempo drums give this track a light punk rock feel. Harmonies work in to boost the hook as Danielle leads a call and response chorus within twinkly pop elements that work in particularly nice. The verses revert to this grungier feel with lots of fuzz building in on the guitars, and the track eventually breaks into a drum-driven bridge that has this hand clap quality. I really like that percussive element. The guitars and vocal work in as the track develops into this jazzy feel, and I love the woodwinds that come into play. It's kind of random, but it works so well. Finishes with a refrain on the hook and a return of that vibraphone element that was featured earlier on in the track and that is very prominent. Love You Right is your sixth song, opens on this hard driving rhythm guitar with light tone and this crisp mid-tempo drums that just pop. Danielle's vocals hit and the song maintains this feel through the first verse with a bit of harmony that develops. There's this soft drum roll that leads into a delicate section that's piano driven. I really like the shift here. That's also complemented with a soft rolling bass, minimal percussion and no guitar as well. Those crisp drums reappear with the guitar that comes back into the song, along with this stellar, rollicking piano element that steals the show on this one, in my opinion. There's a solo around the 2 minute mark that starts to sound like a sitar. I feel like there's a lot of bands playing with their guitars and giving them this kind of like modification. And I like the way that this moment increases momentum in the song. This song is just going to move through its peaks and valleys as it goes from start to finish. Moving into your 7th track, The Farm hits with the soaring vocal and somewhat somber rhythm guitar that plays with space really well, showing off the diversity of their sound on this one. I love this song. It's another highlight for me. There's a nice feel of folk and country blues that carries this track, again, calling to mind the Stones, and particularly, You Can't Always Get What You Want. Great second guitar works in along with pleasant harmonies. There's the piano and droning organ, and a soft drum beat with prominent hand claps that bring this track to life as it builds. And then some harmonica and banjo that work in, like just to fill it all out. Really surprised me there as well. It's really well done, and I enjoy the gospel feel that takes over the back half of this track as well. They're doing a lot in a very short time span. Your 8th track is entitled Lucky Stars. Got this lo-fi driving drum that quickly shifts to hi-fi drumming with this muddled, fuzzy electric guitar and vocals that capture that 90s alternative and shoegaze feel. Shifts through these sections of lighter and somewhat minimal instrumentation and heavier sections that put that like flamed guitar to work, but it maintains this ethereal feel throughout. I love the soft explosion of the music to finish. I will say this is where like the lyrics and the theme kind of start to lose their focus. Your 9th track, Million Years, there's a brief sound of children before an up-tempo drum beat kicks in with recitative vocals and a light, almost kind of like Baroque style synth that works in the backdrop. Drums drop into this quiet lo-fi territory as Danielle begins to sing the chorus, but those begin to a slow build back to give the song some liftoff. This thing continues to work through shifts where the drums are prominent and then they're pretty much just absent, playing with this fun techno flair as well. Another unique musical track that kind of surprised me and that I did enjoy for the most part. Everybody's Trying to Figure Me Out is your 10th song. You got this blithe, tinny drums that open up with mellow, arpeggiated rhythm guitar and gentle driving bass joining in. Definitely channeling this 90s like acoustic grunge feel. There's this great little droning slide that floats around briefly before Danielle takes over. And I would say that this track takes this unexpected energetic shift at around the minute mark with the drums doing the heavy lifting. The song continues to work back and forth between these two elements before shifting to a coda that really does a nice job of combining the two, along with two big vocal refrains to lead this thing towards its end. Your 11th track, Try to Feel My Pain, comes out hitting heavy with just a big soul influence. Organ and driving percussion provide the canvas for Danielle to work before a soft touch of bass and sparse guitar play in. I love the bridge before the coda that features a little bit of horn action, and it combines well with the organ that's there too. Finishes with a little kick of funk. It is a fun track. I do feel like we're getting a little tired at this point, especially with this stretch of songs. Your 12th song, entitled Spinning, builds off that little kick of funk, and like it brings it to full effect. And I love the bright, fuzzy staccato synths that play over the groovy rhythm section. It captures a big pop influence in bits of disco and synthwave that are work here, kind of incorporating an adult contemporary feel too. But with all this fun stuff going on, it fails to have an impact, and it's really disappointing, especially being as committed to this track run as you are. And then Cry is your 13th track. It opens with this soulful piano and gospel harmonies before being overtaken by a strong beat that brings a heavier pop influence. There's staccato synth element that mimics strings that are going to carry throughout the track. Plays with the contrast of light, uplifting melodies and themes of sadness and perseverance, but it just falls flat for me, and I feel like the lyrics really aren't falling in line with the theme as well. Your 14th and penultimate track, Blood on the Street, gets back to that country blues feel. I love the twangy acoustic rhythm with lots of big rolling drums and fuzzy bass. Danielle's vocal performance steals the show on this one. Like, the song overall is just another highlight for me. This thing is soul tinged with a bit of dark edge. I think there's a great contrast there. There's a nice solo around the 2-minute mark that carries this track to coda. And into your final song, Now It's Time. Got this thick electronic beat and grinding industrial style guitar that's going to usher in the track's vocals. All this comes courtesy of U2's song Numb. There's definitely a pop edge to it, a little more of drive that they add that is not featured in the original. This grinding edge drops into minimal vocal and drum territory before reverting back to it briefly and then shifting to a fluttering kind of like classical sounding style to close this thing out. I applaud it for its experimentation, but after 14 tracks, getting into the 15th, and especially with the strength of a track like Blood on the Street, which could have easily closed out this record and had so much more of an impact, I just am not that big a fan of Now It's Time, and honestly, just the overall continuity of the back half of this record. There's good stuff going on here, but it pales in comparison to the strength of everything in the first 7 songs on this record. Like songs 1 through 7, the thematic build, the intensity, the tension, the angst that you feel, and just the overall quality music are so exceptional. And I just feel like this album really could have benefited from a trim. And I really feel like Rostam, for all that he's brought to the table, I really feel like the layers of acoustic guitar textures that you hear throughout this thing are a big part of his influence. For all that he does so well, I feel like that's ultimately kind of his biggest failure in working with Danielle from a production standpoint, is not being more critical maybe of some of these later songs and giving them the trim that they deserve. They could go on an EP, they could maybe be reworked and featured in a future record. I feel like 15 songs in general is just too many for an album. But I'm still going to give this thing a 7.2 out of 10. I would have loved to have rated it higher. And honestly, the first 7 tracks, if they would have just worked into Everybody's Trying to Figure Me Out, Trying to Feel My Pain, and Blood on the Street, this thing could have probably easily been in that mid-8 territory. But I am glad to have this band back after a 5-year hiatus. It's good to see them growing as artists and to kind of moving into that space where they're not afraid to say F off to the things that don't bring them any positivity. After the successful decade that they've had, I'm sure there's a lot of grifting and a lot of circumstances that have come up that have led to the overall frustration and build, aside from the romantic focus on this record. So I am going to still pick up the wax begrudgingly, even with the 53-minute runtime, actually going a little overboard there. But you can find that 2-disc set at your local record store. I love Zia Records here locally in Tucson. Support whomever's around you in your town, in your city. Take care of those people for taking care of you and adding to your shelf. And please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025. And stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We will see you next time on the Beat Sessions.